Ah!
Today we will dive into one of the most mysterious and tragic crime stories of the early 2000s. This is the story of Laci Peterson, a young woman from Modesto, California, who disappeared on Christmas Eve 2002. On the surface, her life seemed perfect: a loving husband, a cozy home, and an expected child. But her disappearance reveals secrets and betrayals hidden behind the facade of family happiness. How did an ordinary family end up at the center of a sensational investigation? What secrets led to this tragedy? Find out all the details of this shocking case. Laci Denise Peterson was born on May 4, 1975, in Modesto, California. She was the younger of two children born to Sharon and Danny Reese. Laci grew up in a loving and supportive family. Her parents divorced when she was young, but both maintained close relationships with the children. Laci was a popular and energetic girl, active in school and involved in various sports, including cheerleading and ballet. After high school, Laci attended California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, where she studied ornamental horticulture. She was known for her cheerful, outgoing, and hard-working personality. At university, she met Scott Peterson. Scott Peterson was born on October 24, 1972, in San Diego, California. He was the only child in the family of Lee and Jackie Peterson. Scott grew up in a wealthy family that owned a restaurant business. Since childhood, he has been interested in sports, especially golf, and considered becoming a professional player. Scott attended Arizona State University on a golf scholarship, but later transferred to California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, where he studied agricultural business. There he met Laci Reese, and the two became romantically involved. Scott and Laci began dating in 1994. Their relationship developed rapidly, and they quickly became inseparable. Laci, being bright and outgoing, complemented the more calm and reasonable Scott. In 1997, after graduating from college, they married and moved to Laci's hometown of Modesto. The Peterson family was well known in the local community. Laci worked in her parents' family business, managing a restaurant, and Scott found work in an agricultural company. They lived in a cozy house, which Laci enjoyed furnishing and decorating. In 2002, Laci found out she was pregnant, and the couple eagerly anticipated the birth of their first child. They planned to name their son Connor. Laci was thrilled about her pregnancy, doing everything she could to prepare for the baby's arrival. She attended pregnancy classes, read books on child care, and took great care of her health. Family and friends described Laci as a caring and devoted woman who was looking forward to motherhood. She was active and full of energy, even in the later stages of her pregnancy. On the outside, Laci and Scott's life seemed perfect, but behind closed doors, their home was in trouble. On December 24, 2002, the day before Christmas, Laci Peterson woke up in her cozy home on Covina Street in Modesto, California. 8 months pregnant, she was excitedly preparing for the upcoming holiday and the birth of her first child. The house was decorated with holiday lights and a tree, and the air was filled with the scent of gingerbread and pine. Scott, her husband, had planned to spend the morning fishing at the Berkeley Marina, while Laci stayed home, intending to do some housework and walk their golden retriever, Mackenzie. As the morning progressed, Scott went fishing, leaving Laci alone at home. He said he would be back for lunch to help her with holiday preparations. Laci decided to do some cleaning and cooking for the holidays. She also planned to take Mackenzie for a walk in a nearby park, as she did almost every day. Around 10:30 a.m., neighbor Karen Service spotted Mackenzie walking down the street on a leash, but without Laci. Karen knew that Laci often walked her dog, and assumed she was nearby. She brought Mackenzie home, but Laci was nowhere to be found. As time went on, Karen began to worry. When Scott returned from fishing around 4:45 p.m., he found Laci missing. Everything was in place, but Laci was nowhere to be seen. Mackenzie was in the backyard, which seemed odd. Scott began calling friends and family, trying to find out if they had seen Laci. No one knew where she could be. He called Laci's mother, Sharon Rocha, to see if she had Laci. Sharon, hearing about the disappearance, immediately drove to the Petersons' home, and together they contacted the police. The local police responded quickly. Officers arrived at the Peterson home and began their investigation. They interviewed Scott and neighbors, trying to piece together the events of that day. Scott said he had gone fishing that morning, while Laci had stayed home. Investigators searched the house but found nothing suspicious. A massive search began, involving dozens of officers, volunteers, and Laci's friends and family. From the first day, the media covered the case extensively. Posters with Laci's picture were hung all over the city. Her family and friends handed out flyers, hoping that someone had seen her the day she disappeared. Reporters flocked to Modesto, covering every detail of the search and investigation. Laci's story became national news, with her photos appearing on the front pages of newspapers and newscasts across the country. The search continued day and night. Volunteers searched neighborhoods, parks, woods, and bodies of water, hoping to find at least some kind of lead. But time passed and still there was no sign of Laci. Each day that she was missing increased the anxiety of her family and friends. They organized prayer meetings and fundraisers to support the search. Although Scott actively participated in the search and cooperated with the police, his behavior began to arouse suspicion among investigators. He seemed unusually calm and collected for a man whose wife and unborn child were missing. The police began to scrutinize his alibi and soon discovered inconsistencies in his story. Scott claimed to have spent the morning fishing at the Berkeley Marina, but he could not remember exactly where he was or what fish he was trying to catch. Investigators checked his route and found that he had indeed been in the Berkeley Marina area, but there were no witnesses who had seen him there that day. These inconsistencies increased suspicion against him. A key turn in the investigation occurred when Amber Fry, a massage therapist from Fresno, contacted the police. She said that she had been having an affair with Scott Peterson and that he had introduced himself to her as an unmarried man. Amber was shocked to learn of Laci's disappearance and pregnancy. She agreed to cooperate with the police and provided recordings of their phone conversations, in which Scott claimed to be a widower and celebrating Christmas without his wife. The revelation of Scott's affair with Amber Fry caused a storm of public outrage. The media and the public began to view Scott as the prime suspect. The police increased surveillance on him, hoping to find more evidence linking him to Laci's disappearance. The Petersons' home was searched, their vehicles were checked, and their financial records were checked. Scott continued to maintain his innocence and expressed concern for his wife and unborn child. However, his cold and distant demeanor, as well as his lies about his marital status, increased the suspicions of investigators and the public. A few months after Laci's disappearance, in April 2003, 2 bodies were discovered on the shores of San Francisco Bay. The first body to be found was that of a baby, believed to have been ejected from its mother's womb. A few days later, the body of a woman, badly decomposed, was found nearby. Despite the advanced state of decomposition, police quickly linked the finds to the disappearance of Laci Peterson. DNA testing confirmed that the remains were those of Laci Peterson and her unborn son, Connor. The bodies were in such poor condition that it was impossible to determine the exact cause of death, but the discovery confirmed the worst fears of the family and investigators. The discovery was a shocking turn in the case and led to immediate action by the police. On April 18, 2003, Scott Peterson was arrested. At the time of his arrest, he was in the La Jolla area of San Diego and was caught with a wig, a large amount of cash, several cell phones, and identification in his brother's name. This fact increased suspicions that he was intent on fleeing from justice. Scott was charged with double murder, his wife Laci and their unborn son. His arrest and subsequent trial became a major news story, generating enormous public and media interest. In November 2004, Scott Peterson's trial began. The trial attracted enormous media and public attention, becoming one of the most talked about cases of the early 21st century. Prosecutors argued that Scott killed Laci to escape his family obligations and start a new life with Amber Fry. They cited his numerous false statements and testimony, his erratic behavior in the days following Laci's disappearance, and evidence of his infidelities. The trial lasted several months. Prosecutors presented a wealth of evidence, including accounts from neighbors who had seen Scott on the day Laci disappeared, recordings of his phone conversations with Amber Fry, and financial documents showing his significant debts. Particular attention was paid to his fishing trip to the Berkeley Marina that day and inconsistencies in his alibi. The defense insisted that there was no direct evidence to prove Scott's guilt. They argued that he was genuinely concerned about the loss of his wife and child, and that his behavior could be explained by shock and stress. The defense also attempted to discredit Amber Fry's testimony, arguing that her testimony was exaggerated and misinterpreted. The testimony and evidence were carefully considered by the jury, which faced the difficult task of reaching a verdict. Public opinion on the case was divided. Some believed Scott was guilty, while others doubted the evidence and believed that he might be innocent. After weeks of trial and deliberation, the jury returned a verdict. Scott Peterson was found guilty of the first-degree murder of Laci Peterson and the second-degree murder of their unborn son, Connor. The verdict sparked a heated public and media reaction. Many felt that justice had been served, while others continued to question the fairness of the verdict. In December 2004, the judge sentenced Scott to death. He was sent to San Quentin Prison, where he remains on death row. Scott has appealed several times, but all of them have been rejected. His case continues to generate interest and discussion in the media and the public, remaining one of the most famous and controversial criminal stories of our time. The case of Laci Peterson remains one of the most tragic and talked about crime stories in the United States. It demonstrated how hidden secrets and betrayals can destroy lives and families. The story of Laci and Scott Peterson also highlighted the powerful influence of the media and public opinion on the course of legal proceedings. Many question how fair the trial was and whether all the evidence was truly interpreted correctly. Years after the verdict, interest in the case continues to grow. Documentaries, books, and television shows continue to explore every aspect of this tragic case, trying to find answers to questions that remain unanswered. The story of Laci Peterson and her unborn son Connor will forever be remembered as a symbol of love, deception, and betrayal, a warning of how far human passions can go and the devastating consequences they can have.